Welcome to Collapse Astrology, and welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Hummingbird, and this is the first of two videos in which we are going to talk eclipses and eclipse seasons, and also some of my favorite topics, karma and past lives and reincarnation and fate and destiny. So in the second part, you'll find a set of guidelines for eclipse season that I hope helps you get a sense of how to navigate the next few weeks, because the energy does look extra turbulent, mostly because there's so much happening at the Pisces Aries threshold. But before we get into the deeper stuff, in this video, I'll break down the basics of eclipse season. There are two eclipses. The first is on March 14th at 23 degrees of Virgo, and the second is on March 29th at 9 degrees of Aries. Even though neither eclipse is technically in Pisces, there is no missing the Pisces energy flooding both of these charts. To me, that is actually what makes the season so intense. Mercury and Venus both retrograde back into Pisces right around the time of the second eclipse. And just after that, Neptune makes its first grand entrance into Aries. I've got a whole separate video coming on that last part. So for now, let's talk a little bit about the nodes and what they are telling us about how we need to evolve in these edgy and confusing times. In January, the nodes left the Aries-Libra axis with the North Node entering Pisces and the South Node moving into Virgo. They'll be in those signs for the next 18 months, and they describe the karmic dynamics that we'll be working with over that period of time. The nodes are most directly activated during eclipse seasons when the sun and the moon kind of cross into their line of fire, but they also describe the longer, slower journey that we go on during that entire 18-month span. Wherever the South Node is, we're being asked to release old layers of our identities and ways of being, shedding habits and patterns that don't serve us anymore. And South Node transits can really require us to get vulnerable with ourselves, to see things that we might not want to see. In Virgo, some of the shadows called out by the South Node might involve overworking, resentfulness, perfectionism, crankiness, timidness, insecurity, or impatience, just to name a few. Every sign has its fair share of shadows. And so it may be time to take greater responsibility for how you manifest wherever Virgo is in your chart and life, finding ways to replace those shadows with Virgo's superpowers of practicality, groundedness, humility, and the magic of the mind. Meanwhile, the North Node is always opposite the South Node, and it's an area of the chart where the soul calling is to lean in, to embrace that energy, to expand and evolve and move past growth edges there. So while we release layers of Virgo's attention to detail, Pisces energy is calling us to dream big, to let go of rationality, and to move towards the ineffable. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm not sure I like the way that sounds. When I look at how delusional so much of Western society is, I feel like we could use more of Virgo's rootedness and meticulousness and humbleness and all that stuff. But I think what the North Node in Pisces means, especially with it being right now in late Pisces, where it will be during this first eclipse season, we need to get real about the spirit world, the world beyond the physical five senses that Pisces represents. The North Node often brings experiences where we feel like we're in over our head, wearing shoes that are too big for us. We can feel like a novice where the North Node is concerned. But of course, what that means is it's a great chance to learn and grow in that area. So for folks out there like me who work with spirit guides, whether you're just independently in touch with your own team, or you work with a specific set of deities through a lineage, or even if you're just any kind of spiritual practitioner, if you're devoted to spiritual growth, this is a time to lean into that. Whatever your lineage or guides have to say about this moment, about navigating emergencies, about life and loss and death, and also about creation and rebirth and regeneration, now is the time to take that more seriously, to trust yourself more deeply when it comes to your spirituality and your extra physical senses. And sorry, as always, to throw a little shade, but if you're someone who's out there denying the reality of telepathy or ancestral connection or astrology, If you're still clinging to a paradigm that the only things that are real are what our science can prove, honestly, I feel sorry for you. I doubt that that's anyone watching this channel unless you're here by mistake, but there are lots of folks out there. Just the other day, I was really disappointed to see a famous autistic influencer completely dismissing the telepathy tapes. And I read the piece that they wrote, and their attitude was just so smug and closed off, and it was obvious that they hadn't even listened to most of the podcast. And honestly, to me, that kind of mindset indicates like you're a little baby, like you're spiritually immature, if that's the paradigm, like if that's the worldview that you're stuck in. And that might be another word for what the North Node invites us into. It's maturation, an increase in nuance and complexity and ability to hold wider, bigger truths. Especially at this moment when we're at the brink of literally committing species-wide suicide, to me it is so arrogant to imagine that humans are at the apex of our potential, that there's not more to life and existence beyond our 5 physical senses, beyond this material experience. So, if you're with me, now is the time to trust in your own spiritual truths and guidance more than ever. And especially with Saturn in Pisces, it's a great time to get more intentional, to add some structure and boundaries and discipline into the mix of your spirituality. So that could mean making time daily, 10 minutes to sit at your altar. That could mean making time weekly to worship, whether you do that in community or in nature or some other way. That could mean making time maybe monthly for a workshop or a plant medicine journey. And remember that right now, with all of this Pisces energy, surrender is a really big part of the process. I cannot imagine a better archetypal combination than the North Node in Pisces to represent the phrase, lean into the mystery. Now, Saturn is heavily involved in the first eclipse. It's conjunct the sun and opposite the moon almost exactly. And Mercury goes retrograde the following day, or maybe even just later, the same day as the first eclipse. And these two placements bring a strong note of caution to this mid-March entrance to eclipse season. Saturn generally creates experiences that feel like heavy lifts, where we feel immobilized or unrewarded for hard work. And in my experience, it's better not to fight against this energy when it's super activated, as it will be in the middle of the month. It's better to work with Saturn, like I suggested, by intentionally embracing its themes of boundaries and structures and discipline, and just keeping your expectations low for any big accomplishments. Meanwhile, a Mercury station means that we just don't have all the information. And there's some information that won't come out until April, maybe even late April when Mercury leaves the shadow of its retrograde. So choices you make right around now, or whatever it is you get swept into right around the time of this first eclipse, could have unexpected and uncalculatable consequences. The second eclipse is at 9 degrees of Aries. And you can see on the chart that Mercury is right about to move back into Pisces. Meanwhile, Neptune is right about to move into Aries, and both of those transits happen the next 2 days after this eclipse. So at the moment of the second eclipse, there's still a flood of Pisces energy influencing the whole picture, even though the eclipse itself is in Aries. The degree is interesting too because it's the degree where Venus stationed retrograde on March 1st. So it's still kind of a hot spot from that station, right, at 9-10 Aries. Venus was there for over 2 weeks, and now the eclipse is just lighting that area of the zodiac and that area of your chart up again. With Aries, we have themes of emergency and survival and action power and the warrior instinct. We have themes of selfishness, both the good kind and the toxic kind. We have emergence and initiation. It's the first sign of the zodiac, the sign of rebirth after death. So we can count on that fire to be present in the energetic atmosphere around that time. And because of Venus, there may be some relational threads that tie together throughout the month related to these Aries themes. But again, there is also so much Pisces that it might feel like trying to keep a flame alive outside in a hurricane. I don't know what that means exactly, whether it will be a climate thing or a political thing or a stock market thing or something else. But I see this being a really challenging energy to manage. Again, something that could feel immobilizing or overwhelming or too chaotic and confusing to make clear choices in. You might feel extremely emotional. So what I recommend is pray to your gods or your guides or pull your tarot cards or do your breath and meditation and yoga and whatever other practice you have. And then also let the currents greater than yourself and your ego carry you through the rest of the month. Now, I will caution, I mentioned plant medicine as a practice before, and I want to be clear that I do not recommend any kind of psychedelic use during an eclipse or even during the entirety of eclipse season, and even more this one because of there being so much Pisces energy. That includes actual molecules, but also even psychedelic breath work or other trance practices that really have the intention of uprooting the consciousness from material reality. I don't recommend any of that anywhere near any eclipse season, really. The energy is just too open and too dimensionally messy, and there's a reason why a lot of indigenous traditions around eclipses center on protection. So in my opinion, it's much better to focus on whatever helps you to stay grounded and embodied, especially during an actual eclipse. But as a longer term Saturn and North Node in Pisces practice, because that's going to be going on the whole year, one ceremony a month might be a good commitment, a good way to embrace late Pisces without letting it sweep away your entire life. During eclipse season, though, it just might feel like your whole life is getting swept away. We will all have to let go of something in one way or another. It will probably be an illusion that we need to release, something that we may have fought hard with ourselves or with others to believe in. But hopefully this will be a relief, because when there's a truth that our hearts and our guts and our nervous systems know, it is exhausting to try to deny that with the justifications of our intellect. Hopefully we can free up power that has been trapped in that denial and start harnessing it more intentionally for our personal and collective futures. That is my prayer. All right, so that's it for part one. For lots more on what eclipses themselves are really about astrologically and some big picture framing on things like karma and past lives, you'll want to check out part two of this video on how to jump timelines during eclipse seasons. Even more than your average astrological transit, eclipses present opportunities to release old pathways and patterns and frequencies and jump almost spontaneously to new ones. I've been learning experientially about this for a lot of years, and I developed a set of guidelines for working with the energy. So in part two, I will share those, and I'll also share my basic beliefs about karma and reincarnation and those other fascinating subjects. You also might want to check out my 2025 forecast to learn about the next phase of this year after eclipse season, when we finally get free of all the heavy Pisces and move into the bold initiatory cardinal square between Jupiter in Cancer and Saturn in Aries. We can't rush the end of the mutable energies we're swimming in right now, and they will be swamping us until at least the end of April. So expect continued overwhelm in one way or another until then. But by mid-May, and especially by mid-June, I think there's a good chance that most of us will feel way more confident and empowered and on purpose than we do right now. All right, guys, be sure to like the video and subscribe here so you don't miss part two, which will be out in just a few days. And this channel is not monetized yet, so if this breakdown was just what you needed and you are able to leave a tip, there's a link below where you can buy me a coffee and help me keep this work going, and that is always super, super appreciated. See you all soon.